Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to McHenry County's next Lunch and Learn. Today, we are talking about case meetings. Little caveat, we have a presenter who was unable to be with us. So last minute, but we are going forward with it. She provided us her presentation. So I'm going to present it, and Samantha Becker from DCFS is with us as support. Samantha is the supervisor for the caseworkers in Woodstock. Okay, so she works with us a lot. We're happy to have her on our team. All right, so we are going to dive right in with kind of what's going on with case meetings. So to think about it, why do we have all these things? This is based upon the best interest principles for the kiddos. And these are things we all discussed in CASA class. We know that the best interest principle means that we have the child as safe possible, as permanent as possible, and as quickly as possible, especially given a child's sense of time. All right, so what these meetings have done and what DCFS has done is said, okay, we've got 9 key child welfare practices that make up the basis for why we are doing these kinds of interventions with the kiddos. They created something called the DCFS core practice model, and that's where meetings that we're talking about have stemmed from. We don't have necessarily those same 9 key child welfare principles for the CASA, but they match everything that we do just fine. So we are to serve as an agent of change. That's kind of what we do. We're making things happen. We're facilitating as we can. We always demonstrate our cultural humility by respecting the family. We form relationships with the child and with the other important people in the child's life. Provide behavioral support as much as we can in terms of allowing service or, coordinating services with whatever people need. We don't really provide behavioral support directly, but we might be helpful in linking the child to appropriate services. Some programs might do that more directly. Usually here in McHenry County, we convey the need and kind of help people figure out where we can make that happen. Advocating for the child and family, providing trauma education to all parties. And that might not look like actual trauma education, but we are always in our trauma-informed lens. We're going to talk about that more as we go. We are supporting all initial and ongoing assessments to see how things move forward. And we work as part of a team. That is our role, is to be good team members. Okay, so this core practice model, they've got it based into 3 different areas. They call it the family-centered trauma-informed strengths-based practice, which is FTS, the child and family team meeting, which is going to be the first case meeting that we discuss. And then the DCFS model of supervisory practice is not something in today's conversation, but it's something that is part of the DCFS core practice model. So the idea of FTS, the whole vision behind it, is that we're partnering with families to help them make decisions, set goals, achieve outcomes. They're always acknowledging the importance of family and building on strengths of the children, the parents, the foster parents, extended family members. All the while, we're continuously understanding that everyone has experienced traumatic experiences. We identify them, we intervene them, and we mitigate the effects of these adverse experiences. So that's the vision behind the core practice model. All right, so kind of diving down what that means and how we as CASA play into that. Being family-centered means that the family gets to define who is part of the family. We might talk about it being the natural parents, maybe any siblings, things like that. But that could extend beyond the initial biological people or even extended biological family. That is one way that we are very culturally sensitive to families, by understanding the breadth of people that might be who they define in their family. This family centeredness also creates the ability for everyone to observe the traditions of the family, understand their beliefs. So culturally, again, we're seeing where they're at and understanding what things are going on. A lot of this family interaction is focused on the visits. Visits allow a child to visit with their parent, reduce some of that separation trauma. It is so important that we promote the connectedness of children with their families. The longer children are disconnected, the more likely they are going to be unstable, have depression, become unemployed as they get older, and be delinquent. So promoting that connectedness is just vital to the health of the child as the child grows. And then the visits also allow a place to evaluate the progress of how the relationships are going. Parents can try out new skills. People who are there can help coach the skills along the way so that it's in real time and in action. And we can see how things are going and provide, updates, address how things need to be done. And again, we can observe how they culturally interact with each other. So as CASAs, one of the things we do is observe visits between children and their parents. We're to be a fly on the wall. We're not really there to be interacting with the kids at that point, because it's the time for those children to have time with their parents. But what do we do during that time? So we don't interfere, because we're promoting the connectedness. We're promoting the family to be together. We're watching for the strengths that we see. So strengths from the parents, strengths from the child, so that it can inform our advocacy work. When we see, hey, this is going really well, we can apply this to other areas in the case. That helps us use the family's foundation that they already have. And again, be observing what's going on with the family culturally, be ready to support that, be ready to advocate to support that as well. So that's a lot of what we can do with the visits in order to be family centered. The next big aspect of it was to be trauma informed. So what it means to be looking at things through a trauma lens is to look at behavior and be sensitive that behavior might be coming from a place of trauma, especially when the person is experiencing stress. So a lot of us experience this, like kids acting out at school or other kinds of things that, we might see bad behavior at. We aren't necessarily trauma trained in terms of doing interventions with the kids, but we can take a step back and say, hey, this behavior that we're experiencing, and it actually could be very good behavior. Sometimes the parentified child is also trauma behavior. Not that that is good, but it's not the bad behavior that we sometimes get labeled. But we're acknowledging that this behavior has a different source other than the child's own volition. Just that's who the person is that they want to be. We need to make sure we acknowledge, though, that trauma doesn't just affect the child. It affects the natural parents. It affects extended family. It affects foster parents. So everyone is kind of exhibiting need in this area. So how do we specifically help as CASAs in supporting healing from trauma? Number one, help the child feel safe. Be a safe person for that child. We all need stability in many different ways, and being safe is a huge step in that direction. And that's kind of where the whole CASA model comes from, being an independent person that a child can rely upon. Exhibit patience, patience with the child, patience with the family. And by showing patience, we can help others step down their own reaction to traumatic behavior. Develop relationships, not just with the child, but with all the different people, so that you can have those conversations that say, hey, this might not just be bad behavior. This might be a kid acting out due to trauma. Can we think about that and what we might do differently? Maybe it's not just always time out and no recess or whatever it is. So it might be teachers that we need to help remind that. Our teachers are becoming more and more trauma informed, but they got a lot on their plates. So sometimes they might need a little help reminding about that. Ourselves need to be reminded when we're talking to a parent who's like, oh my gosh, or a foster parent, oh my gosh, this is just driving me crazy. And kind of, okay, well, let's think about this in a different way. Maybe it's not just acting out, but it is purposeful acting out and has a trauma background to it. And your advocate managers can always help you kind of walk through some of those conversations so that you can have those in a productive way. We want to support as much connectedness as possible. Connectedness is one of those things that combats trauma. Be continually trained. I don't know how many of the CASAs have had time to take trauma-informed training. We've got some great ones in McHenry County. And that is something that if I could say every CASA had trauma-informed training just to have the basis, then we need to do that. But then stay on top of it. Be continually aware of what's going on with trauma. Make sure it's at the forefront of your brain. But in addition to all of this, you need to take care of yourself. Vicarious traumas, legit. And we all feel things, and we need to take care of ourselves and make sure we keep healthy boundaries as well. So that's some of the ways that a CASA specifically can help with the trauma-informed aspect of all the meetings that we have as CASAs with people. The last piece of this model is the strengths-based portion. And the strengths are taken into account both at the assessments and in the service planning. It allows people to input what they believe their strengths are. So the caseworkers are working very diligently to make sure that we're building upon individual strengths as well as the cohesive unit strengths. One of the best things we can do as CASAs is simply believe in the family. Know that they can move forward. Not all things end up in reunification, but believing and supporting any return home goal in the moment really helps a family believe that they can move forward. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's just because you believe doesn't mean it will happen. They still need to do the work. But that's kind of where we can stand in that. So with the advent of this model that DCFS has been put together and using the CFTMs and things, this is a quote they had from a Cindy. And this is the first time anyone listened to me. And just feel what it would be like if no one ever heard you and then someone heard you. And I think that's pretty powerful. All right, so the CFTM, or the Child and Family Team Meeting, is kind of the core component of this core practice model. It's the center for the casework. It is taking in the reality of the family now, where they're hoping to go, helping create decisions and decision models to make sure that they can create permanency. And any of the information that goes on in a case outside of the CFTM should ultimately flow back to the CFTM. So the principles of a CFTM is engagement, making sure that the family members know how to participate. Full disclosure, people need to know what their service plans are, what hiccups have been experienced. Participation from all members, that's where we get to come in. Collaboration on making those decisions, and then focusing on the permanency. So that's the intro to CFTMs. What we're going to do now is talk about kind of how a CFTM is structured and put together. So the first thing that happens with the CFTM is the caseworker preps with the family. So this is before the meeting even occurs. They work with the family to decide what the purpose or the goal of the CFTM meeting is. They let the family know that they're going to have an opportunity to update their story during the CFTM. We all have things we need to say. Sometimes it's better to be prepared. So this allows the family to be in ahead of time. Check in on their strengths, make sure that, you know, we're focusing on that. Help the family identify who should be invited to the CFTM. And they can include all of the people that they consider part of the support system, part of the people to help put together the solution. And then if there are any barriers to attendance at the CFTM, the caseworker helps address those. A barrier might be having childcare in order to be able to participate. And then the caseworker takes care of inviting all of the individuals to the CFTM. That includes CASAs. Very often they're virtual these days. I have started to attend a few in-person ones, but that is kind of dependent upon the caseworker and what the needs are of the people who are part of the CFTM. I know we all like face-to-face contact, and yet sometimes getting places can be a barrier, so we don't always require that. All right, so the actual meeting itself starts with a welcome and introductions and a statement on confidentiality, because the CFTM, not everything needs to be shared. Children who are old enough to participate may participate. Children who are too young, that's not an appropriate place for them, which also means that it's not an appropriate place to go sharing all of the information that perhaps came out of the CFTM. As a CASA, one of the things we need to do is make sure that we're there early enough that we're on time for those CFTMs. Coming in a little bit late and people not having any clue who you are doesn't really help participate in the process. You also need to be prepared to explain your role as a CASA, but also be careful. Some of the verbiage that we might use, like, well, I'm the one consistent person for the child, might not feel good to a parent who's like, okay, well, I wasn't able to be consistent. So explain your role, practice explaining your role before you get there. That's culturally sensitive to the people who might be hearing the message. Okay. All right, and then the caseworker will walk through what the purpose and desired outcomes are of the meeting, so that everybody kind of knows how the conversation needs to be focused. If we get too far off track, we can come back to the purpose of the meeting for the CFTM. The caseworker will establish if there are any non-negotiables. I'm not sure what other non-negotiables might be, but there are certainly court orders that might state, hey, there's a protective order. Whatever is in, you know, the visits have to be this because that's what the judge said. Agency hasn't been given discretion yet. Whatever those court orders are, that is sometimes the parameters that we need to work inside of. And then the group is also going to set some ground rules, principles of how we want to behave with each other so that we can achieve. Some of those ground rules might be, you know what, we're not gonna shout at each other during the CFTM. And we're not going to talk over each other. If it's virtual, maybe I'll take advantage of the raising the hand so that I know when someone needs to speak next. Those are just some ideas of what might be included. Then the family is given an opportunity to tell their story. There might be different people who need to tell their side of the story. And the story is not like go back to the beginning all the time. Sometimes it can be an update from the last CFTM to where we are now. And as CASAs, what we can do is we can listen to hear what goes on in these families that can inform our advocacy work. How can we better develop a relationship with a child? If they're talking about memorable moments with kids, maybe they're talking about birthdays and how things used to be celebrated, but they can't do that way because they're not together right now. What can you do to support all of that? So those are really important stories to listen to, not just, oh, yeah, I know that's what's going on in the case. And then the caseworker is also going to focus on the strengths. And every family has strengths. Sometimes it requires a special lens to be able to sit back and really regard those things. People who have been using substances but survived for a long time have a set of skills that they have put together in order to survive for the length of time that they have. And using those skills while overcoming an addiction and getting your children back can be a really great asset. And it just needs to be used. We need to be paying attention to those. We need to be aware of the things that people are capable of. All right, then we've got the bulk of the meeting here where we're identifying what the needs are that need to be determined. And then from those needs, we're figuring out, well, what can we do to help meet those needs? There are a lot of things we all say, oh, every kid should be in therapy and things like that, but we don't need cookie cutter resolutions to everything. Sometimes we need thinking out of the box. We can participate in the thinking out of the box, especially if we've had conversations with the child or things that we know. This is a brainstorming effort as well, throwing things out, seeing where they go, seeing if it can morph. What we need to be careful to do as CASAs is not solve the family's problems. They do need to own and figure things out. We can contribute, but we're not there to dictate, hey, do this, do this, do this. Even the caseworker is facilitating those decisions, and maybe through something like motivational interviewing, helping the family come up with what those good decisions are and action plans that they need. So once they figure it all out, they put together an actual action plan about who needs to do what and by when. This is something that will kind of grow with the family so that the action plan goes on and on. Make sure you note any of the actions that you can do to support the child and the family as you go. And then after we've got that lovely action plan, we'll wonder what could possibly go wrong. So part of the CFTM is to identify any barriers. No, I'm not ever going to be able to get to that meeting because I know I'm never going to be able to have childcare for that. Whatever those things are, so that the group can kind of work on what those issues might possibly be as they try to execute the action plan. All right, and then the caseworker closes the meeting. The meeting at this point has usually been 60 to 90 minutes, sometimes can last up to 2 hours. The casework, the DCFS brochure that I have talks about the frequency of CFTMs and that they should begin within the first 40 days of a case opening and be about every 90 days. If a youth is in residential treatment, they should be monthly. So a little bit more frequent with those folks so that they aren't just stagnating in a residential environment. I have this brochure. I'll drop it in chat as we move into the QA in a little bit. So before I open it up for Q&A, I just want to talk about a couple of the other meetings that we're talking about. The CFTM is occurring at the 90-day mark, and then the ACR, the administrative case review, is at the 6-month mark. This is not the same thing. It does not have the same purpose at all. So you can't really swap in an ACR for a CFTM. It is run by a moderator from DCFS who is trained in doing this kind of quality review of how the case is going. They are looking to see if DCFS continues to be necessary, that the child be in care. They check on whether or not the services offered are appropriate, and that they are in fact receiving those services. A good example might be, yep, the child does need trauma therapy, which is the one, a lot of times CASA is talking about, but no, we have no provider yet. Okay, well, that's a problem. The moderator will address any specialized services. So that could be a child with special needs, health issues, making sure all medical appointments are up to date, any educational needs. This is important that we focus on the progress of an education for the child in wherever they're placed, and that there's continuous education. Education is just such a protective factor for our kids that we just need to really support the educational progress for them. And the ACR is one way that folks take advantage of checking in on that educational progress. If a child is older, say 16 and older, what's their independent plan? What's their independent living options going on? The ACR moderator checks compliance to the service plan by the family and the service providers, and evaluates things as they go forward, perhaps suggests a goal change, etc. So we should always be invited as CASA to the ACR. I know kind of the way it works is we get the notice in the mail that there's an ACR coming that establishes the date and who the moderator will be. And then the caseworker provides the actual link to the WebEx room for that moderator. Just for those of us who are on a case that has multiple ACRs, it's the same link for the same moderator each time. So when I have the same moderator showing up, I know that his link or her link will work when I join in. It's helpful to identify yourself when you are logging in so that the moderator knows it's a CASA person, and they'll ask once you're let into the meeting, who are you and what's your role here? They are all very familiar with what CASA is. It's unlikely that you'll have to explain the role of a CASA to an ACR moderator. So as they begin the conversation, as the moderator begins the conversation, they're going to talk about some of the tough topics. And our role is not to jump in and bring them all up. Our role is to sit back and listen to see that they do get brought up. And once they're addressed, great, we don't need to speak up. However, if by the end of the tough topics kind of conversation, we do need to be ready to say something. A good example from training, when we all do Kaylee, in the Kaylee Moore case during the CFTM, sometimes the CASA remembers to bring up that the foster parent's been calling, has used the word crack baby to describe Kaylee. And some of the times in training, we've seen it done really, really well, where they've approached it as this is a fact that's occurring and it might be a problem. And being that observational CASA and not coming in with evaluative thoughts and feelings about it really helps move the conversation forward. After the big conversation, you might be put into the waiting room, and the ACR moderator might say, I'll be with you to have a one-on-one conversation with you. And later on, the moderator will have a one-on-one with you with no other people present. And the ACR is put together that way so that each person can voice things that sometimes are hard to voice in the large group. If you didn't have time to bring something up, that's a good place to bring it up. It's better to voice concerns in the large group so that everyone is aware, rather than, you know, I have a secret problem over here that you've discussed with the moderator. One of the ways you can prepare for an ACR is to talk with your advocate manager and figure out, hey, these are the kinds of things I need to bring up. Your advocate manager might say, hey, the ACR is not the right place for that topic. Let's do it a different way, so that you're prepared for what you need to bring to the table. Another kind of meeting that we sometimes are invited to, well, we should always be invited to, is the SIP. It's with an S, like sipping a drink. Stands for the Clinical Intervention for Placement Preservation. These are sometimes more emergency type meetings. They're not necessarily scheduled, initially at least. When a child's placement might be disrupted, then a SIP is often held to save the placement, figure out what needs to be done with the child, figure out what support can be done, identify if there's interventions that can help. Maybe ISP is required at this point, figure out what solutions we have. So a lot of that goes on in a SIP. We can assist with the brainstorming. This is a good place to bring in. Remember, we've been keeping an eye out for what those strengths are and help build on those strengths. And we can provide an outside point of view. A frustrated foster parent might not be thinking about trauma, but they might also be worried about something that doesn't seem as much of a big deal to the actual placement. And if they can get their other worries fixed, you can see that, hey, this whole big picture would help save the placement for the child. So those are the big meetings that we are often involved with. So I've done a whole lot of talking. What I would love to do now is open it up for questions. Before I do that, let me ask Samantha, is there anything that you would like to add about what I said or reframe?
No, I mean, that kind of is everything, like I said, in a nutshell.
Okay.
Obviously, you know, every case is case specific, so sometimes there's going to be things different than what you said, but yeah, it's all, the gist is what you said, but sometimes things can take different turns. But
Very good. Very good. All right. If you would like to pop up and ask a question, please do. If you are preferring to put it into chat, that's fine. But let's open it up. What kind of issues or misunderstandings are you thinking about for case meetings? What struggles have you had? What are you like, yay, I can't wait, I didn't realize that?
As a CASA, can we initiate one of these meetings, or do we have to wait for somebody else to invite us?
Not sure, Samantha.
I've never, yeah. I would say on that aspect, if you have some concerns, bring it to the caseworker's attention to see if a child family team meeting needs to be held, or, you know, like the caseworker may have answers to those questions or to your concerns, or, you know, the caseworker may already be addressing those concerns behind the scenes that you may not know of. So.
All right, following up that question, who might be the keeper of the calendars for these types of meetings?
Caseworker. Your caseworkers would know, because they're the ones that set those meetings up, so they would know.
Very good. And they would know the ACR, the CFTM, and SIPs, yes?
Correct.
And any of you who have kiddos in residential, You might also be aware of clinical staffings that occur on a somewhat regular basis. And that's, I believe, going to be a tag team between the caseworker and the residential staff, who kind of are like an on-site caseworker sort of thing.
Correct. The caseworker should also know when those staffings are as well.
All right. So Samantha, what if we have a case that you have had no CFTM for?
I will say, like I said, been with the department 16 years, July. So historically, child and family team meetings, depending on the area of the agency where you're working, they've been historically kind of an issue. Like I said, it should always occur, but depending on their caseload, the office environment, the management, supervisor, staff, they don't always happen, but they should. So I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I can just kind of set up policy and procedure.
Right.
Yeah.
And from what I'm all just studying recently, guys, just because of a change in presenters. But my understanding from what I was looking at is that this is a real difference in how casework has been done for our caseworkers. So instead of caseworkers sitting and saying, hey, I've got these things that need to get done and let's go implement it, they're sitting back and saying, okay, family, what do you think might be helpful? And then helping put together the plan. So it's a real difference. And cycle time, we all know they got to get things out there, and yet we're supposed to have input.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in a perfect world, because like I said, I did most of my placement case management in Rockford. Volume was always high, turnover was always high. So it's always been there where we've always were best practice is to involve the family in the service plan creation. Unfortunately, like I said, timeline, all the other stuff I mentioned, it doesn't always happen. But because I'm in a smaller office, I'm really trying to make that a priority with my caseworkers moving forward, even because the ACR reviewers are looking now for specific case notes for child and family team meetings. The caseworkers actually have to have a case note in that says we've had some pre-planning prior to doing the child and family team meeting. So it's like kind of added work for them, because before you could just kind of hold the child and family team meeting and have that note. Now they want to see that there was a pre-note, and then they want to see that there's a note after the child and family team meeting was held.
Right. So I'm thinking from a CASA perspective, if you have a case that has never had any meetings, talk to your caseworker. If that's a struggle for who you need to talk to your advocate manager. We'll figure out the right way for that to that conversation to start. I truly believe that every caseworker knows the value of this and is swamped. So, what we can do to help, hey, I think this is important. Can I talk to somebody for you? Whatever, we'll support the caseworker in getting this done, because it's a really awesome best practice.
And the caseworker or the CASA worker can talk to obviously their supervisor, or if they're not getting a response from the caseworker, they can talk to their CASA manager, and that CASA manager can get a hold of supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. We have many ways to get a hold of folks.
Yeah.
Kelly, I see you have a question.
Yeah, quick question for you. So in supporting a foster parent that is struggling to, trying to word this in the nicest way possible, one of the children that I'm serving as a CASA for is exhibiting some concerning behaviors in the foster home. And I think the foster parent is overwhelmed with those behaviors. And obviously the school has been helpful in trying to explain maybe the root cause of some of the behaviors. I know that they're trying to get the child therapy, but in the interim, in these weeks leading up to these more potential permanent solutions, I also know there's been an ISP recommendation. Do you have any strategies to help support a child and a foster parent in that more acute moment, while some of these other services are being lined up in the future?
I mean, some of the things you mentioned is kind of what we try to do. We try to get the IPS, intensive placement stabilization services in there. It depends on kind of like what's going on in the area to see if there's anything outside of, what we can do. So it's kind of depends on the area as far as any additional services that are out there. I know, like I said, not in every area, but there are some like foster parent support groups out there, depending on what town or area the DCFS or POS agency office is in. Like I said, it just depends on what it is, so that like everybody can kind of brainstorm and like, pick each other's brains, pick each other's, the community resources.
Because I feel a little helpless, I've provided some suggestions for books on, parenting strategies, and I just feel like I'm just overwhelming her more because I don't think she has the bandwidth to sit down and read a book of parenting strategies.
Also, has the foster parent reached out to their licensing rep? There's also additional trainings that their foster home licensing rep can potentially provide them.
Is that true though, if it's a family member that's serving as the foster parent?
Are they licensed yet or unlicensed? They're not licensed. They may still be able to do some of those trainings. Like the caseworker could potentially speak with the licensing department and say, hey, can you send me some of those trainings? Because eventually I would think that the family would want to get licensed. It's just the benefit of them, they get more funding and such. So that could be an option to maybe have the caseworker reach out to the licensing rep for some additional training, depending on if it's like, specific behavior stuff or trauma or what it may be.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, we want, even if we have kin as foster parents, they should be moving towards licensing as well. And as Samantha said, they do get an increased stipend once they are licensed, but it is going to provide them with some of that foundational training to address a lot of this traumatic behavior and have a lens to think about it a little bit differently. So yes, there's financial incentive, but there's peace of mind incentive. There's a lot of things that go into that. We certainly do have family support groups. I know Be Strong Families has I think they call it parent cafes, where they have a drop-in virtually for families to be able to do that. But the other thing that I was thinking about as Kelly was talking about her case is one of the things that all of these principles are built upon is the strengths base. So if you're observing something that's working well with a family, how do we repeat that? How do we implement that in other areas? That's not necessarily a whole lot of investment on their time because they are already aware of how to do that. So that is something we can do as a CASA, is be that outside point of view that says, I know you're frustrated, but it looks like this works. Let's do that.
And then also, because they're obviously probably new foster parents and not licensed, the department will pay, like, let's say the child's interested in any extracurricular activities. The department will pay for those types of activities. So whether it be like soccer or karate or something like that, the department can help pay. So that's something else that the foster parent may not know, thinking they have to pay.
Who is there a specific segment of DCFS that the foster parent would contact to get those?
You contact the caseworker. It's in policy procedure 359. Each caseworker has access to know exactly how much they'll pay and how the forms that need to be submitted and such, which if the caseworker doesn't know, they can ask their supervisor.
Yeah, I think we may have to go down because the caseworker said for her to ask CASA for money. And
No.
then,
Oh.
hang on.
No.
And then also go to like Mother's Trust or Catholic Charities. But to me,
Is it not to be, is it a purchase of service agency or the department?
you mean the caseworker?
Is he or she employee of DCFS or
DCFS.
purchase DCFS? Okay, yes. They could, no, they tell, it might be a newer one, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Have that caseworker talk to the supervisor because the department does assist with payment
Okay.
for extracurricular activities.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Welcome, Norma. I see you were able to pop in. Norma was going to be presenting with us until she needed to be elsewhere, so I appreciate it. I did a abbreviation of your PowerPoint, and then Samantha
Awesome.
Becker from DCFS has been my
She's outstanding. That's
Your
awesome.
sidekick today, yeah. You're kind of silent sidekick, yeah.
Great. And I'm glad to take any questions, and I so apologize that I had to go to the other meeting, but I'm glad to take questions, or Sherry, you can share my email. I'm glad to do whatever I can to support you and answer any questions about Child and Family Team Meeting and what we're doing with that whole core practice model with DCFS.
Excellent, excellent. So in the chat, I did drop the CFTM brochure that Norma had shared with me. So that is available for you. If you are unable to access things in chat, just email me and I will send it to you directly. That's fine.
We also have that in Spanish, and if you need it in a different language, we can get it printed in a different language too.
All right, I'm dropping my email in there for you guys. And then I will pull up Norma's info here and give it to you as well. While I'm doing that, what other questions are out there, folks? Either that or you have perfect CFTMs and ACRs and you're all good. I do have a question that I was talking with a different advocate on. She wasn't able to make it today. So we participate in the ACRs, and then where does that information go? Is that a report CASA can get? Sometimes I think a CASA is feeling like, I don't know, did they hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I will confirm this, but no, I do not think that you can get that report from ACR, because that report is actually a federal report that gets responded back to the federal government. And then we then basically get data from that report that will tell us the quality of the ACR, who participate in it, how the individuals felt that the case was going, how did they feel being a part of a Child and Family Team Meeting if they were a Child and Family Team Meeting. But if you wanted information that could possibly support your CASAs or clarify something about the ACR, you could always talk to that ACR reviewer. They can definitely, they will tell you what they can tell you, unless they can't because of confidentiality. But they are definitely individuals, I've worked with them before, that are very, they'll give you the information, right? You can seek them out if you email them, and they will definitely be able to explain or answer a question. And if they can't, they'll get you to who can.
Okay.
I can put the ACR manager's email on. Her name is Tracy Greenberg, and she's excellent. And if there's any questions, because the ACR reviewers, basically they're reviewing all day, every day. So it might be hard for them to answer right away, but Tracy is not. So I can definitely I will get you Tracy's information and put it in the chat.
Okay.
For sure.
All right, what else, my friends? All right. Well, I will let Norma put Tracy's info in. While she's doing that, I just want to say thank you, Samantha, for your backup. Norma, thank you so much for giving us the content so that we could move forward today. Definitely appreciate it. And then popping in here for a special appearance.
Yes.
And thank you all CASAs for joining in and making it something that we can work forward for. If you need anything else, give us a buzz. Take care.
Thank you